I want to welcome you to the show, brother. Thanks for coming on.
Absolutely, yeah. It's seems like you got a cool thing going here, and it fits in with what I'm doing and what we kind of all are getting after on a daily basis pretty well.
Absolutely. I'm just gonna get right into it because I'm so eager to hear this. We were supposed to have the pod last week. I get a text from you. Hey man, you're gonna have to reschedule. I killed an elk, and I told my brother, I think that's the best excuse I've ever heard for anybody canceling anything. I was like, absolutely, whatever you need to do. Why don't you run us through that story, man? I'm stoked to hear it.
Yeah, so it's actually not a happy ending, unfortunately, but I don't remember. I said it to you and then Case Bradford, who I had on my show yesterday. And I don't remember which one was which, but I was like, yeah, I got to like an elk down or elk in the mountains, or got to try and figure out how to get elk out of the mountains. So it was my buddy had flown out on September 30th or 29th. And yeah, October 1st is his first day of rifle season here in Wyoming for elk. And yeah, I got the same tag that I did last year. And last year I had this crazy story where I had never gone hunting in my entire life. And first ever hunt, my buddy flew out from New York, who I went to college with, and he hunts deer and, upstate New York and stands and things. So it's a bit different. He's never hunted elk. He's never been out west. And on our first trip on the last day, yeah, we got a bull elk. I shot him for 405 yards. Most insane experience packing that animal out in the middle of the night in grizzly country. And yeah, we're just excited to run it back. So it got in October or September 30th. We are scouting, the day before. We see a ton of elk. So we're just stoked for October 1st. In the morning, we get into some elk, and I got like 300 yards away from a cow. Could have shot it, was hoping the bull would kind of come behind it, and then it didn't. They ran away, and we're like, all right, whatever, great first morning. And then a snowstorm hits. We're at 10,000 feet, and yeah, we get snowed on October 1st. Had to leave, go back to my town here, which is like 3-4 hours away, and they got like a foot plus in the high elevation. So we were kind of bummed. And then we were chasing deer around my area in this shitty zone and didn't really see much. Decided to ship it back on that Tuesday, which was, like the 3rd, I believe. And yeah, we went to a different spot, the same spot that I got the elk last year. And on Wednesday morning, we saw, a good amount of elk herd higher up, but then couldn't get close to them. So then the last session, before I have to drive back to the airport the next morning, yeah, we're glassing, last light. I kind of do the same thing as last year, where we're actually watching a bull moose run around the mountains, and we're like, of course there's a moose right here, not elk. But that's how it goes. When you're hunting, you see everything besides what you're looking for. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to go up top and do one last glass of the valley. And I do. I'm looking, and then all of a sudden I see these elk just coming out of the woods, and there's a bull in that group, and I sprint down this mountain to my friend, and I'm like, dude, we need to run like half a mile as fast as we can. And we get there, and then they're across this creek, and unfortunately there's a whole tree line in blocking the creek from where we are. So there's a tree line and then a creek, and then they're on the other side like 300-400 yards away. And we're just walking down this tree line, trying to find a gap. It's getting dark. Sunset already happened. You probably have like 10 more minutes. Find this like 6 to 10 inch window and set up. And it happened to just be like perfect to get like a terribly set up shot, but it was a good enough window to where I had a great look at a bull. And yeah, I took the shot. He struggled for a bit, went down. And then, he went down, head was down. And we were just like, it was a crazy week. So I just turned back to my friend, and like we kind of celebrate for like 10 seconds. And then I look back, and he's getting up, and I'm like, oh shit. And I try to like get set up again to take a second shot. And by that time he had moved, just a few feet away, but he was out of that really small window to where I couldn't take a second shot. And yeah, he just slowly walked away, and I try to, go down this steep ass hill through these trees, cross the creek, and get on the other side and look for him. But at that point, he's already gone, and if anything, probably just pushed him further away. So at first we thought, he went down, like he was struggling getting up, like he's totally like internally bleeding, probably just find him tomorrow. and I was very confident. But then I spent 2 days looking for him, and I found absolutely nothing. I didn't even see blood, really. So to me, I probably, it was probably a bad shot, and hopefully it was just like a muscle kind of shot that got through, and the impact, it just stunned him to kind of fall down. So I'm almost 90% sure that he's still alive with what I found, which was nothing. So yeah, pretty devastating roller coaster of emotions in the past week to go hunting, and he was a bigger bull than last year. We could tell from the rack. And yeah, but that's how it goes. There's no guarantees in nature, in hunting. And yeah, you just kick yourself and you play back that scenario over and over and over again. But all you can do is just kind of learn from that. And yeah, I just find all these things is, if you don't grow up hunting, you don't have someone to mentor you. I basically learned everything by myself. There's going to be a lot of mistakes, learning curve like on the way. But now I'm like, all right, I'm going to take 2 weeks off and then hopefully go out end of next week and kind of last push and get something. At this point, I just want to fill my freezer, so I'm not going to be picky. I wasn't even being picky really at all. I'm not a trophy hunter. Like if I can get a nice bull, like that's ideal. But really, like I'll shoot a nice cow, that's fine. I just want to fill my freezer with the most nutrient-dense meat, and I've already had this profound experience, and nothing can compare to that, really. So just being in the mountains, regardless, the 2 days I was looking for him was sad, but it was like 60 and sunny, nobody around, just me in the mountains walking around, like a maniac. But it was still so beautiful, no service. Yeah, it's still a profound experience no matter what happens, and that's all you can ask for.
Yeah, dude, there's so much to unpack there, and no, I'm serious. I'm so glad we started with this because much of my life right now is not revolved around hunting, but around creating a life that allows me to do it as much as I can in the near future. And I want to actually go, because I've been hunting my whole life. I killed my first deer when I was like 9 or 10. And so shout out to my dad for doing that, because he was actually kind of a self-taught hunter and he got his sons out early on. So I've had the privilege of going on some cool hunts and killing a handful of deer, a bunch of hog, all these things. Did I just hear you correctly say that your first hunt ever was a successful elk hunt?
That's right. Yeah.
You motherfucker. That's fucking insane, dude.
First
That's
ever.
Insane.
Yeah, last year. It was crazy, surreal experience, and obviously, yes, set the expectations very high for life.
Dude, that's absolutely incredible. Because I mean, like I'm sitting here thinking, okay, I've done some cool hunts. I've like I said, I've sat in many a stand in my young life. I've spent plenty of hours in Georgia pine trees somewhere. And the fact, it almost makes me a little matty.
I've had a lot of people tell me that.
But I mean, dude, that's so cool. That was your first hunt first and foremost, because I think that's like the most profound type of hunt there is. And so I'm sure I'd be eager to hear yours.
The only way to one up it would probably if it was like an archery hunt, but that's just not even realistic. But I'll tell you what, man, it's just, this wasn't because of just luck or like a guy. Like we hiked 40 plus miles. It was just us two. So it'd basically be like if you came with me, because you grew up hunting on the East Coast in stands, never been elk hunting. So it basically be like you were the equivalent to my friend. Like you and my friend both had a similar hunting experience. And yeah, we didn't really, I scouted the zone. Like again, I had no idea what I was doing. So scouting last year, I didn't even really know what that meant. And yeah, we just kind of had 5 days and went at it, and it's cool because you're kind of starting from zero, but it's pretty common sense how to track elk. They're similar to deer. First light, last light. They're gonna be up high if it's warm, come down if it's cold, and who knows what. But yeah, sorry, I just figured I'd throw that in there because it's easy, and I feel like it's become glorified, and now all these rich people are just paying for guides and outfitters, and Joe Rogan's, Cam Hanes have influenced so much, but there's still a lot of opportunity if you're willing to put in the work to have a pretty cool, profound, unique experience that no one else can have. Yeah,
the thing that's interesting to me is the amount of people that would immediately hear the fact that you didn't kill the animal and consider it's not a successful hunt on your end, but the reality is, even if that animal did die, it's not like it exited the food system. That's food for another critter, another creature. So that's the reality of it. It's probably not the ideal reality, as I'm sure you would like to eat the animals that you kill or that you injure in any way. But that is the name of hunting. It's the name of anything, right? Like if you, it's kind of it harkens back to that basketball analogy. Like you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. Well, sometimes you miss the shots you do take. So that's my question to you is, what did you learn from that though? What did you learn from the experience?
Yeah, and it's so hard because like walking through this, we did so many things right up until the very, very last moment. So in order to successfully kill an animal, like there's so many split-second decisions. This is why I also think it's like one of the most impactful ways to become like better at decision making, better at critical thinking in high pressure situations. Same physically, because immediately from when I glass the herd of elk, they're half a mile down the trail. I have to run down a mountain. We have to get all our stuff. We have to run quietly down a trail, and then we have to find a gap. So we did all these things right. We find a hole. My buddy sets up a backpack, gets a pole stood on it so there's some stability. This isn't the shooting range, people. Like every shot you take in the wild is uncomfortable. It's not stable as much, and it's just not going to be ideal. So you have to deal with non-ideal situations. Your heart is, pounding through your chest. It's way harder to take a missed shot. And then all of a sudden, my rangefinder, I can barely even see the yardage. My buddy's rangefinder is like waterlogged. We're like, all right, we think it's like 275. I look at my ballistics card. It's a 5-inch drop, so you have to know your ballistics in a split-second decision, and then you have to figure out, okay, what's like 5 inches high? There's no target. There's no like, here's the bullseye, like shoot me. It's a blonde body, a dark brown neck, and you're like, all right, where are the vitals? And there's so much that could go wrong. So for me, let me say at first, it's absolutely gutting, that the possibility that I shot an animal and I didn't harvest it and it did die, or even that I shot an animal and I injured it and it still lived, because that's obviously impacting that animal's life quite a bit. But like you said, there's bear prints all over this trail. Not to my mom's chagrin that I was walking around there by myself, but looking for this animal. But I was happily prepared with a 10 millimeter Glock with me. But what did I learn? I learned that you should never, it's not over until it's over. Don't prematurely celebrate or, really lose focus in the moment for a second. So I should have just held on him with my scope for 5 minutes, because I've even heard stories where, an animal could be down for multiple minutes and then, they could get up. You never know what's going to happen. And what else did I learn is, trust your instinct. Because at first, when I shot that round, I was like, ooh, I think that might have just been like a little high or something. And I went to go. I was actually thinking about taking a second shot, and my buddy's like, wait, he's gonna go down, and he did actually. So, kind of trust your instincts, but don't lose focus. And at the same time, be prepared for the worst outcome possible, so that you're over prepared, instead of assuming that the same thing's going to happen. And it's really unfortunate because last year, like it was the same sequence of events. Last year was even a further shot. It was 400 yards. And I was ready to pull that second bullet. And then my buddy's like, no, he's down. Like, let's just wait. And then he was down and he was dead. And I ended up, I shot him right through the liver, and he was down. He was dead in a minute. Perfect shot. This year, your brain's like, oh, the same thing's going to happen. No, it's not going to happen. That consistency is totally dependent on what happened in the moment. It has nothing to do with the past. So, expect things aren't always going to go your way. But then again, as well, practice matters. I probably could have shot more at the range. I was spending a lot of time just moving my zero from 100 yards to 200 yards. And I could always have practiced more, and that's never going to hurt. And put yourself in situations like you go to the range, like run some sprints on the side of the range, which I actually have done. And then hop on in, see if you can get there at 200, or go on like a windy day, or go on a suboptimal environment day to just kind of get more of that feel, and wear gear. Don't just like shoot with nothing on. Like wear some your harness or things that are going to be on your body when you're actually hunting. So try and simulate as much of the environment as you can. So yeah, tons of lessons learned, but I would say the major one is, there's no guarantee that things are going to work out, even if you did put in the work, which we did. And we made it only takes one, bad decision or mistake for things to go wrong, even if you made 10 perfect decisions before that. So staying on point the entire time. And,
I mean, like I said, there's so much to unpack here. The hunting is so, and people that don't hunt, it's hard to realize this. Maybe you can understand like peripherally, but like not from the moment. Hunting is so representative of so many things in life, and I compare it to jiu-jitsu and other sports as well, but that's the same as life. Like you can put in the work, or at least what you think is the adequate amount of work, but it's also, the beauty of it is now you know what the adequate amount of work is and is not. So now I'm sure next year, as a responsible hunter, you're going to train even more. You're going to make sure that you do these things. And one thing that I've been doing, actually, it's funny you say the sprints. I was back at my parents' house recently shooting my bow, and I would do just that. I would like run, pick up my arrow, run back, and try to like control your breathing, because archery is like you mentioned, that's a whole nother
it's
game.
Even more. Yeah, it's even, you need to be even more dialed in. And that's why I didn't really bow hunt this year, because I'm an ultra novice.
Yeah. No. Oh, well, dude, Tyro experience. Tyro means novice and beginner. So that's beautiful. My buddy Dalton, who I had earlier on the show, he's like straight up a legendary hunter. Honestly, like the hunts that this guy's gone on as a 25-year-old is, he grew up in Washington. He's been hunting since the day he was like, probably could walk. He's killed, so 2 Septembers ago, I love telling this story. 25 days hunting solo in the month of September, archery, elk. On the 25th day, he killed an elk and had to pack it out himself. But just the stories that are intertwined with that 25 period day of isolation. And you even mentioned it, like the sad 2 days where you're kind of walking around looking for the bull. Those quote sad days in my book are some of the best days that a human being could spend, that they could live in the woods, in wilderness, interacting in a legitimately tangible way with the environment that you're in. Man, it's cathartic in a way, but like I mentioned, it is sad, but I think you're doing it the right way.
Well, you become so connected as a hunter, because you are able to observe nature as if you are a part of it, as just a still, object. When you're just sitting on a mountainside, you're not hiking through, like you're not, the object of hunting is to blend in, not to create a disturbance, as where hikers and backpackers are clearly doing that on purpose for safety reasons as well. But yeah, I mean, the amount of wildlife you see, I mean, over that week I saw a mama black bear and a cub. I saw a grizzly bear sprinting up a hillside from a mile away, and it was insane. I saw tons of elk. We saw multiple bull moose, cow moose, all the little birds, all the chipmunks, the squirrels, the pikas, or whatever mountain rodents that they have up here in Wyoming, coyotes from a distance. You're able to really just immerse yourself in this environment, and then you're also just so connected to the earth. You're grounded, you're out in the sun, you smell everything that you're supposed to smell in a natural environment, all the
Lysol.
Yeah, all the terpenoic compounds and what have you from the trees, from the brush, the sagebrush, and it's just incredible. And your senses become so elevated. Like when I'm looking for this elk, I would pick up this tiny scent trail of, I don't know if it's the blood or just a dead animal or the adrenaline, but if you've butchered an animal before, you know that smell. And I would pick it up just like a whiff, and I'm just like, I felt like a bloodhound, like really just, your senses become so elevated, and then you hear this tiny movement, and you're just so locked in, but you're so in tune with that environment. It's really just you can't even put words to that type of experience. And when you are out in the woods by yourself, like your buddy's out there for 25 days, it's just incredible. And I can't even imagine. And I want to get to that point as well. But yeah, bow hunting, I think elk is the ultimate experience of that and of being connected, and then also the testament to the discipline that you need to have the skill to put in a successful shot. And yeah, that's why these guys, Cam Haynes have become kind of idols for so many men, because really I think in the wilderness is when you become a man. I mean, everyone always talks about kind of that moment, like there used to be moments for men to become men, from a teenager to a man. What is that? And now
the rite of passage.
The rite of passage, yeah. Like, what is that in modern society? And I didn't really feel, you go to college, you get a good paying job. I didn't really feel like that was like a rite of passage for me. And I didn't really think about this much until recently, but carrying out that elk last year, the hardest thing I've ever done. And then I was able over the next year to feed people I love and care about that meat. So for me, that was probably the closest thing to a rite of passage to fully becoming a man than anything I've experienced personally in my life. And I know a lot of other hunters have mentioned that. So I think it's very valid.
The comment you just made about man, like as a man, in my opinion, the greatest imperative, the preeminent imperative of man is to protect and provide. So you think about protection can be from an enemy, but can also be from starvation. So that kind of plays into providing. The reason I think that there is an innate hunter in all of us that gets drowned or covered in the city or in any environment that's not that, it negatively affects the male psyche in a big way, in my opinion. So I got nothing but respect for the fact that you're doing that. And I do have a question about that, actually. Is like, I'm always curious because, as we've spoken about, you didn't grow up hunting, which is fascinating to me because I've never second guessed it, right? Like it's not a huge part of who I am, but I mentioned I want it to become a bigger part, but I have been hunting literally every year since I was like 10. So I don't think about it. I just kind of like, that's just in the winter I go hunting, in the fall I go hunting. Why do you hunt? Why did you decide to take that up?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of was just this transformation. So after, and it coincides with my whole health journey, right? Like I had one too many concussions in college, and that led me down like a self-healing rabbit hole after having, symptoms for over a year, 15 plus months. And then I got into everything that I'm kind of into now by going through this self-healing journey. I learned how lifestyle is really important, and then how eating clean is really important. And then you learn about diet, you learn about the food system. So I got really into regenerative agriculture, and I got fascinated with connecting with ranchers. I started buying, quarter half beefs. My sister lived out here in Wyoming, and I would visit and, buy beef from a local rancher. And then, simultaneously, I just grew up, I grew up hiking, I grew up skiing, I grew up camping. My mom's from Austria, so that's kind of like ingrained in my, I guess, DNA, the mountain life. And that's where I've always found kind of has been my place that I love more than anywhere in the world, is to be in the mountains, to be outside in that fresh air, and nothing can compare to that. And then I was getting into, meat, just being really fascinated by regenerative agriculture, regenerative raising of livestock, of beef, how this could be the solution to healing our environment and also feeding our planet, our country, the most nutrient-dense food on the planet. And just being in Wyoming, you have this history, this force of the bison. It's on the state flag, it's in Yellowstone. And yeah, I got connected with a bison ranch that I work with now. And in general, hunting to me, it was something that I heard about, I listened to on podcasts. Then being out here in Wyoming, it was actually a tangible thing that I could get into. And I was just talking with my brother-in-law one year, and he grew up in Wyoming, Montana, and he had hunted growing up, and then he kind of didn't hunt for 5, 6, 7 years, just being at university and then, working full time as an adult. And I was like, I'm going to do my hunter safety and put in for tags and just see what happens. Like, well, I don't doubt I'll even draw anything. I don't even know how this works. Fishing game websites are like the worst and most confusing websites in the world.
Yeah, maybe on purpose. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know, but I put in for deer, elk, and antelope here in Wyoming because I had just gotten like my residence for a year, and I drew all 3 tags in that June of last year of 2022, and I was like, oh shit, like. I guess I'm buying a rifle and I guess I'm, going to practice how to shoot.
That's a ready, fire, aim scenario right there.
And go from there. Like I had the hunter safety and then I reached out to, my friend in New York who, again, hunted kind of like you growing up, mostly whitetail and stands, but he was really and he loves follows all the elk hunters, follows all these guys, these influencers, really helpful for the gear, really helpful for like a rifle and things like that. But I would say it's a very intimidating process to buy a rifle, to go to the shooting range for the first time, like by yourself. Doing all this self-taught is very intimidating. And I was very thankful that my buddy was willing to fly out for the hunt. And yeah, again, we're just like, all right, I guess we're going to look for elk in this, giant zone. Like these zones are massive, you could drive around them for 10 hours. And we're like, okay, well, there's some other people driving their fancy Polarises around. And we're like, all right, well, it's pretty warm. Like we think they're going to be high up. Let's go into the wilderness area and just try and go deeper than these older guys that can't go in that deep. And yeah, we, saw some promising sign. I mean, the first day we were hunting, we saw 3 elk in the afternoon, and then we saw them the next morning, and we're like, okay, we're on.
And then you're
something.
hooked for life.
Yeah, and we're like, we're doing the right things, but then it's like, oh, there's like a day gap where we didn't see any elk, and we're like, damn, do we know what we're doing? I had like a cow call, and I was like, do I even need to use this? Like, I don't even know anything about calling. But we kept putting ourselves in good situations and hiking in far, and yeah, I mean, there's elk there. It's just whether you're going to come out and see them. And, got a little lucky on the last day of last year that we kind of got a perfect window and, just put ourselves in that opportunity. But for me, it was always the most admirable way to acquire your meat. I mean, it's also the highest quality meat. Like the elk I shot last year, we're talking, we hiked in 2.5 miles. From that point where my car was, it's an hour drive to get back to a campground. And then from that campground, it's another 30, 40 minutes to the next town. So you're an hour and a half from your car driving from service, and then you're like a 2-hour hike to your car. So you're in there, and there's no nothing. It's just the wilderness. So that's like to me, the most pure, nutrient dense meat that you could ever eat. And the fact that you have to carry that out yourself for sure is the most admirable way of putting in that proof of work and acquiring that. Because to me, the biggest issue that I realized when researching and learning about our food system and eventually writing my book is the biggest problem is that we're so disconnected from where our food comes. And I couldn't have thought of a better way to get more connected than to start hunting.
I 100% agree with everything you just said. The common theme of a few of my podcasts recently, or conversations, has been, you just touched on it, the quality of meat. And I wrote down just now, consuming energy, because I'm a firm believer in this, that when we eat an animal or a food, we're not just consuming the nutrients or lack of nutrients that animal or food provides us. We're eating the energy that was in that. We're consuming that energy that was in that animal. That might sound a little like hoopla to a lot of people, but you think about these elk. These elk have lived. You just mentioned it. The air that they're breathing is the highest quality air in the world. The water that they're drinking is the highest quality water in the world. The food that they're eating is natural. They have no idea what glyphosate is. They have no idea what hormones are. They have no idea what any of that shit are. They're living a naturally balanced, stress like life as a prey animal would be. So when we're eating a wild elk, a wild game animal that is hours away from human interaction, you're consuming that like wilderness. And this is why I think that you hear people speak about eating elk or eating bear and legitimately feeling like invigorated, like not like a cow even, not like a whitetail even, but there's something invigorating about it, and I think you're spot on about that. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I mean, it's totally real, and I've gone down the past year, kind of like down this quantum biology rabbit hole, and it's actually true. So the water in your body, in an elk's body, and anywhere can actually retain memory, like it stores memories. So the environment that an animal is raised in will completely be indicative of the quality of nutrition that it applies to you. And you don't even need to be able to quantify that. Like, you're just saying this from a purely logical standpoint, and it's 100% true. But then there is cool folks like Stefan Van Fleet, who we've had on our podcast, I'm friends with, talked to in person. He's actually comparing this from a phytochemical nutrient density perspective and showing that animals raised in the wild and then beef, bison raised on regenerative pastures are more nutrient dense because they're consuming a wider variety of plant species. It's biodiversity. And when you have an animal in the wild, it's naturally in a more biodiverse setting. Biodiversity just means, abundance of life. You're not just in a feedlot, or you're not just even, it could be 100% grass fed. But if they're only eating alfalfa, you're only getting the nutrients from alfalfa. That's not indicative of a wild animal's diet. And that's, again, another logical, it's a data point to support a very logical conclusion.
That's another commonality between my last few conversations. I spoke with Rob about this in terms of grounding, and Zayd Dodge about this in regards to light. I'm not super scientifically inclined. I have a basic understanding of like biology and physics, like very basic. But to me, I think of things through an ancestral or like sort of intuitive lens. I think, okay, what have human beings been doing for 99.999% of existence? They've been eating wild game, animals that have been exposed to biodiversity. Okay, I should probably be doing that too. That's probably just like what I should be doing. But then Laird Hamilton has this quote that I always reference. I usually follow my intuition and science comes along, or something along those lines. And that's exactly what you just mentioned. It's like, we know these things to be true, but there are people, and it's also very cool, this Stefan Van Fleet guy that you just mentioned, I've not heard of him, but people are actually quantifying this that makes it even more irrefutable, that it's like, this is real. It's not just some hocus pocus, like intuitive bullshit. It's like, this is a legitimate thing that our human biology has evolved to crave and to thrive on. So I think that's awesome.
Yeah, and just like Zayd and Rob probably talked about, like, you don't need to teach hunter-gatherer tribesmen to be connected to the earth, to be outside all the time, to be in tune with their local environment. They just do it, right? So you don't need to convince them. That's just what their biology and intuition has been designed for, and that's why they have succeeded. That's why we're here today. So this is only a new phenomenon that we need to have, studies. Show me the studies, show me the data, show me the proof. It's like, yeah, like science is nice and it's cool to geek out about this stuff and understand why grounding can be beneficial, or why, non-native electromagnetic fields can be detrimental, or artificial blue light can be detrimental. But if you just step back and think logically, like you're saying, you don't need science. You just need to use common sense to really understand what we're designed to do. And the past, 300 years of industrialization is a blip in the span of human existence on this planet.
We've kind of touched on it. I'm really curious to get into it because, like you mentioned, all these things kind of led up little blocks to you hunting. And this is what we've been discussing, but what were those blocks, man? What's your story in terms of health? Like how did you go from where you were health wise to where you are now?
Yeah, so like I said, I suffered one too many concussions in college. Most of them were previously from playing soccer, so I played soccer in college. Luckily, this last one was after my playing career was over. But yeah, I kind of just lost consciousness hit my head, and then I didn't know that I kind of like had a concussion. So that acute recovery phase, which is so imperative to properly recovering from a brain injury, I did everything wrong. I went skiing, I was drinking, I was, up all night. So I just ruined my recovery, and then it led to me having really bad symptoms, classic concussion-like symptoms, irritability, sensitivity to noise, light, extreme fatigue. For those first 3 months until I realized, something was wrong. Went to a neurologist. Neurologist goes, well, you definitely have a concussion, or you did, and you have post-concussive syndrome. And I was like so relieved in that one moment, because I was like, what is going on? Had like EEGs done, and they were all normal. And, it's an invisible injury. There's not like a test. It could be like, you're concussed. So it was in one instance, such a relief to hear that from a neurologist, a trained professional. The next instant, I ask, all right, what can I do to get better? And he says, just take it easy and try and get back into your normal routine. This is 3.5 months in to an injury that should probably, normally, if you do everything right, or at least somewhat correct, would take you like a month max to get back to normal, or at least close enough. And I wasn't anywhere close to that. So that instant, I became, so depressed. I was a very high functioning person. I was, an electrical engineering student. I played soccer in college, had just, a ton going on. And then I couldn't exercise. I couldn't jog without just wiping out my body for a whole week. I was just so fatigued. I was just struggling to get through my coursework to finish the semester. So everything that I love to do, I couldn't really do anymore. And I felt just this very limited state of my life. Like I just couldn't do the things I wanted to do. And that was just so dark. So to me, getting out of school, I had a summer internship in Portland, Oregon, which really immersed me in nature, because Oregon is really about, camping and hiking. It's a beautiful state. My roommate was really into all that. And I was when I was younger, but then I kind of got disconnected through just being a high school, degenerate high schooler, and then getting into college, being a degenerate college athlete, and just totally not being connected to my environment, not being in the outdoors. Like I said, I grew up hiking, I grew up camping. My parents, I was very lucky to have been raised on pretty good diet as well. Didn't eat a standard American diet. And I just kind of lost tune with that, becoming a teenager and into college. But then I reconnected with that in Oregon, and I realized whenever I'm out in nature, I feel better. I can actually go for a hike and then not ruin my whole week. I can, my headaches, I had daily headaches for 14 months, and they subsided a bit. And I was like, this is interesting. Maybe there's more that I can do here. So then I decided, and I was also very stubborn. I was like, there's no way that I can't do anything. Like, I have that mindset where it's just like that's not an option, right? I can't get better is not an option. Thankfully, it's probably from just being an athlete, like I don't like being told what I can and cannot do from every perspective. So then I started researching a ton. I started meditation practice. That was fantastic for me to just gather my thoughts and think that I can heal. I am capable of healing. And even if I can get 20% better than what I am right now, that is leaps and bounds of progress. And from there, I started, reading books about, neuroplasticity and being able to change the brain. This is like a new phenomenon in science that wasn't known until recently, that the brain is plastic, its ability to change. And, that encouraged me more. And then I started implementing lifestyle changes, stress reduction, improving sleep quality. I wore blue light blocking glasses like in 2018, literally, and they were the
cool.
they were the shitty ones. Like they barely did, but it helped a good amount of like just staring at screens all day. I started cleaning up my diet. I started taking some supplements like CBD and fish oil, which have been shown to be great for brain health and reducing neural inflammation. And kind of just started fine tuning things from there, and that showed me that I was able to change things in my life to have a positive outcome, and it worked. I started feeling better, and then slowly, I was convinced that I could heal myself, and then I just kept making progress. And from there, I was able to slowly get back into exercise as well. And that to me was a big one. Then I started running, and that kind of, brain derived neurotropic factor you get from running, that runner's high, it's really great for your brain. And from there I was like, all right, like I could do anything. And then I actually probably did too much, to whereas I started running very slowly. And then 10 weeks later, the same buddy who went hunting with me, we ran a marathon May 2019 in Toronto. And yeah, it was incredible from mental fortitude standpoint, but I definitely destroyed my body quite a bit. But the fact that I was, I didn't exercise for a year, and then right when I started being able to like jog again, I was like, all right, I'm going to train for a marathon. And then 10 weeks later ran a sub 8 minute mile marathon. It was the most mentally rewarding thing that I had done up until probably, the hunting experience. And then from there, that was 2019, graduated college, and then I kind of just been obsessed with health optimization ever since. And, that led me down the food rabbit hole, the food system. I'm an engineer by trade, but I just kept wanting to like push myself into this space. I didn't know how. I didn't really like social media of like doing these, clever posts and try and just educate people. So it's like, all right, I'm going to write a book on two things that I'm really passionate about, and that's Bitcoin and kind of health. And then I decided to write about, the food system and beef centric instead. So I wrote a book called Bitcoin and Beef that opened a ton of doors for me and kind of gave me a platform to get on social media and educate and talk about what I believe in. And that's all seeded in decentralization. And it was funny because I realized I was like, oh, I'm really into Bitcoin, this whole macroeconomic environment that's going on. Like, that's really cool. It's very empowering. And then I'm like also into health optimization and the food system. And I kept teeter-tottering between these two passions of mine. And I realized one day I woke up and I was like, I'm into these things for the same exact reason. Because I was in this situation where I was so limited. I didn't feel like I was in control of my life. And what Bitcoin and taking control of your health, individual sovereignty provides is that key for you to be in the driver's seat of your own life, when so many, 99% of Americans, people across the globe, they've outsourced the quality of their life for convenience, and they've just been duped and robbed by these centralized corporations and government entities. And that's why decentralization matters, personal responsibility matters, and individual sovereignty matters. And since then, it's just, the momentum has kept rolling from there, and I'm continuously on this trend of trying to just become, more sovereign by the year, by the moment, and appreciate that and continue to live a higher quality life and bring people up along with me by empowering them through education.
Right on, man. That's that. Once again, so much to uncover, so much to unpack, which I love. The Bitcoin and beef thing is, number one, it's just a phenomenally catchy name. Like, that's great marketing. It's just very like Bitcoin and beef. It's almost a dichotomy in and of itself. It's like those things have no relation, yet they're entirely related, as you mentioned. And now you have a podcast called Decentralized Radio as well. I want to get into that a little bit in a bit. But first, the Bitcoin side of things. Why were you drawn to the decentralized nature of Bitcoin?
Yeah, I mean, at first I was just, I got into crypto in college because it was, I was at tech school. It was like 2017. People were talking about it. It was cool, make money. And then I kind of learned the hard way for a few years. And then, in 2020, as I became more sovereign through my health journey, I was already like, the system is corrupt before COVID happened. And then COVID happened, and I was like, wow, like I am on the right path here. I am learning from the right people, and I am consuming the right information for me to have an opinion that is unbiased and is really just wholesome in that sense that it's not being influenced. And yeah, it was a no-brainer for me. It was like the macroeconomic environment we're in, the monetary policy that's been implemented by our government is broken. And that has actually led to so many issues in our society, including the food system, including every system that we are exposed to on a daily basis. It all goes back to the money. And Bitcoin has the opportunity to provide a decentralized option for people with a fixed supply so that it cannot be devalued, it cannot be censored. And if you do it the right way, it's really inconfiscatable. And as we enter this regime of more censorship, more government intervention, all these policies, it's to me the only answer. And I'm really excited that we're living in one of the most transformational periods of modern humanity, and to be a part of educating people on that and how they can become more empowered so they're not slaves to the system, to the banks, indebted in every which way, and they can learn that. They can learn how important it is. And at the end of the day, it's your wealth and your health, and those are the two most important things, right? Like if you want to learn about two things, you should probably learn about money and you should probably learn about health, because you need those things to survive and to thrive in a modern world. And unfortunately, you can't outsource that to anybody nowadays, because the knowledge of the experts has been captured by the centralized system. So it's challenging. You have to wear many hats. You have to be, I'm an engineer, but, I'm learning about finance and money constantly the past few years. I'm learning about health optimization, nutrition, farming, regenerative agriculture. Unfortunately, you have to become a jack of all trades, because you can't just trust someone to give you the right advice these days, unfortunately. But that's what happens when the money is broken.
Yeah, I want to challenge you on that word choice, and in like the most appreciative for what you're saying way. Like the choice, unfortunately, I would argue that that's actually fortunate, because I would also argue, I would posit that that's what we've done for the vast majority of our human existence. A tribe never relied on some group of people they never met before to take control of their health, right? Like so I just want to kind of speak that into like your psyche. That like I consider that fortunate, because people like yourself, because of that, are now bringing that back. So in my mind, it is. I struggle with the word unfortunate. Like, how like somebody will invite you to something. It's like, oh, unfortunately, I can't make it, or sorry, I can't make it. I've actually tried to stop saying that word, because I believe that everything is fortunate. Everything happens for a reason. And that reason is in my and your and my tribe's favor. So I think it's fortunate. And the thing that I want to kind of, you just touched on it. I never thought about it before, but the idea that you follow the money. If you follow the money, you'll pretty much understand many things. So why is money so important today? It's because money equals survival in the ancestral sense. Like the money is the animals that you killed. The money is the resources that you had. Money, you think about health, like decentralized health, or centralized health, centralized food, centralized entertainment even. All these things that are centralized all stem back to money. Mm-hmm. And the reason they are centralized in such a way is because of that monetary system. So it's interesting. What came first to you? Was it the interest in the decentralized money or the decentralized health that was first?
Well, first I want to say you're completely right about the fortunate piece. We get into these, habits of word choice. And this journey has been the best thing that's ever happened to me. It was the complete inflection point of my life. COVID is the best thing that ever happened to me. And every year since has continued to get better. And I'm very fortunate for everything that's happened in my life. But from, I guess, the outsider perspective, they would think that, that could be unfortunate. So, sure. It's totally true what you're saying. But for me, I would say the health optimization journey kind of changed my perspective on the importance of decentralization across the board. So that probably came first. And that's always been my stronger suit. Like I wrote a book called Bitcoin and Beef. I was actually going to call it Bitcoin and Biohacking, but then I just thought that word was so cringe. And I was like, it's kind of like too broad. So I was like, okay, let me write about beef and the food system, but tie in, like if you read the beginning of my book, I talk about just health at a high level, and I talk about all, the pharmaceutical companies and how they're so corrupt and things like that. So it's very broad reaching. It's not just about beef.
Beef is punchy though. I think that was that's a really good word.
It's a title. Yeah, exactly. And it sounded way better. So, but really my knowledge, the foundation of my knowledge, and now I'm kind of going full time into this space is health optimization, because I had to take that on to heal myself, right? And that was a full personal responsibility in my journey, and the discipline that I had to have to bring myself back to a place of healing, to where I was equivalent to where I was before. And now I've went far beyond that. So I'm now, I feel better. I'm accomplishing things that I could have never dreamed of even before my injury. And that's what you can achieve when you gain your health back. And to me, it's always the most important thing. Yeah, money is important, but you don't need to have a ton of money. You need to understand money and obviously have some to, operate in this daily life of 2023 that we live in. Unfortunately, you can't just go into the mountains with a bow and survive. I mean, you probably could try, but even then, if you shot like an elk and out of season, it's technically illegal and blah blah blah. So you do need some money to survive. And even if you own a home, like outright, you still have to pay property taxes, right? And yeah, so unfortunately, you do need some money, but really what's more important to me is being educated about that money. And what Bitcoin allows you to do is have that worry be put in the backseat, right? Like, because this low time preference mindset is that, hey, if I own Bitcoin in a 10-year period, that's going to continue to appreciate, as opposed to the US dollar is going to continue to depreciate. And it's like, if you have this long time horizon, which you should, and you need to if you want to heal yourself as well, none of these things are going to happen overnight. And our society has been so hooked on the quick fix, the quick dopamine hits. Social media has been a big part of that technology. Everything is available in an instant. An Amazon package can be delivered to your house in one day. You can just go to the grocery store and buy anything imaginable in less than an hour. Whereas in the real world, if you push off that short-term satisfaction, you will have the long-term gratification and fulfillment that everyone is actually seeking, but they just don't realize it. And to me, that is the most important, foundational virtue that ties these two items of Bitcoin and decentralized health together.
It's the fight for our attention almost, or the fight for our dopamine, really. Like all these tools that you just mentioned, social media, which I've reframed to a tool, food, which I've reframed, like some people, it can be a cope, it can be this sort of escape. But when you think of it as a tool, all these things, especially in the centralized form, they're competing for your attention. Like they want you to just focus as much of your attention on social media as you possibly can, because then guess who pays them? Advertisers who get your eyeballs. So it's almost like the fight for our dopamine. It's like the ethos of it all.
Yeah, and a tool you could harm yourself or use incorrectly, and that's what most people do, unfortunately. And yeah, it is just the reality of the modern world we live in. I wish that I could just be outside in the mountains all the time and somehow still make money. That's the ultimate goal. But as of right now, it's been a blessing to grow this community and interact with so many like-minded individuals. So if you do use it as a tool, like you're saying, it does have an infinite amount of fruitful opportunities waiting for you if you have that authentic message of who you really want to be and put yourself out there, which is a mental hurdle to get over in the first place.
Yeah. I want to touch on something. I think it's in your Twitter bio, if I'm not mistaken, but EMFs, like why are EMFs so important to you, or at least like the mitigation of them? What's your deal with EMFs?
Yeah, so, my background is in electrical engineering. I got my bachelor's, master's degree, and then kind of went into the semiconductor industry. And I was more on the business side of things. Recently left the industry to kind of go full time into, the health optimization and the EMF consulting space, because for the longest time, like I told you, after my healing journey, health optimization was and is my passion. And I really just it's what I was meant to do. It's what I get really into. And for the longest time, I was like, there's no connection here. And then I started learning about things like EMFs and grounding. And, that was a couple years back, and light. And I'm like, cool, this is kind of related to engineering. Grounding is the absorption of free electrons. And I never really took like a super deep dive in EMFs. I kind of understood fundamentally at level 1. But in the past year and then I focused on writing my book for a while, and kind of that took up a year and a half, 2 years promoting, and got really into the regenerative ag space, which I'm extremely grateful for, and I'm still in that space. But in the past year, thinking about what direction I wanted to head in, and I was like, foundationally, Tristan, you've just been into this because of health, and you have this knowledge as an electrical engineer that most people don't. And I kind of really dove deep into the quantum biology side of things, the electromagnetism. I read really great books on this topic, and it's becoming, a popular topic in the esoteric health space for good reason. And I realized, we are electromagnetic beings of the earth, and actually having a background in electrical engineering is probably one of the most advantageous knowledge sets to actually understand fundamentally what is going on in our biology at the subatomic particle level, and how our modern technology has been affecting that through non-native electromagnetic fields, through the disconnection from the earth, the lack of grounding that exists, and the whole slew of research and frontiers that people are talking about. And like you said, a lot of this stuff is kind of like woo-woo and what have you, because there's not a strong research foundation on it, or some of them at least. But if you understand the fundamentals, it really logically makes a lot of sense. And electromagnetic fields, or EMFs, is exactly that. And it turns out there is a ton of research on these topics. It just happens to be that they've been suppressed for the last 50 years. And this has been an ongoing debate since the 70s, since even before then. And the history of electricity and electrification of society can be strongly correlated with the rise of chronic disease. And for some reason, when I was writing my book, when I was really talking about the diet and the meat stuff, I thought it was like, there's more to this. Everyone preaches diet and exercise. This is fantastic. We should 100% be eating clean food. It will make a major difference in how you feel. But that's not it. It doesn't end there. And actually, the things that people who are healthy intangibly do, like go outside, get connected, have a strong community, go out in nature a lot, and that's what made me feel really good at the beginning of the healing journey, could debatably be more important, and is probably more important than diet and exercise. It's the whole lifestyle. And yeah, kind of just with that engineering background, I understand the EMF side of it, and I think it's probably the most pervasive environmental toxin that nobody talks about, or people don't talk about as much, because A, it's complex. Electromagnetism is very confusing. Physics behind it is very challenging to understand and to convey to people. But second, it's very inconvenient. And unfortunately, everyone is in the free thinking space is happy to jump on the pharmaceutical companies, the big food companies as well, and anti-COVID, anti-vaccine. But it's, right when we start talking about EMFs and things like that, they're like, oh, that's crazy, So I'm just trying to bridge that gap, because to me, it's one of the biggest issues, and it's only getting worse because we just continue rolling out more technology. 90% of people have a smartphone now, compared to even 5-10 years ago is like 60-70%. The iPhone came out in 2007. This is all within the last 20 years. And we're seeing chronic disease rates continue to skyrocket. Younger ages. And what is this? It's a soup. It's not just EMFs. It's not just diet. It's not just the vaccine. It's literally everything. And there's a threshold. There's a breaking point. So what happens is, if you're disconnected, you live in a city, you eat shit food, you're constantly surrounded by non-native EMFs, your mitochondria is completely dysfunctional, your threshold for having a serious health event is way lower. You are way more susceptible, as opposed to if you're doing everything right. Yeah, you're going to be exposed to glyphosate on occasion. You're going to be exposed to non-native EMFs. It's unavoidable. Most toxins, you can't be perfect. You're going to be exposed to them. You're going to travel, right? Travel is so detrimental. Getting on an airplane, I mean, is just an EMF bomb. They got Wi-Fi, they got TVs in every seat, right on up against your brain on the seat, and just that density in an airport, and how many devices are connected to the internet in like a square 400-meter location in an airport terminal. You can't avoid that, but you can become more resilient, or you can use tools when you travel to protect yourself. And yeah, I'm just really passionate about it because I think it's underreported. I think it's not getting the attention it deserves because of the modern world we live in. But to me, there's really simple solutions that you can take to be in the top 1% of people. And, you know, it's the 80-20 approach to EMFs. Like, you can get so much bang for your buck by just being very cognizant and understanding what actually matters. But nobody's educated on this at all. So that's what I'm going to try and bring to the forefront with my, background as an electrical engineer.
Well, that's what you're doing. And I'm glad you just mentioned all those things because, well, the first question, actually, before we get to a little bit into that a little bit deeper is what is a non-native EMF for the uninitiated?
Yeah, so the reason why we specify this as non-native, and whenever you tweet about it or whatever, it'd be like 2 lowercase n's before EMF. And that just means that it's not native of what would have existed before modern technology. So there are plenty of EMFs that exist as a result of the world we live in. So the Earth has a iron core. So the churning of that iron, that molten core, is creating a magnetic field, and we feel that. There's a Schumann's resonance, which is a result of lightning strikes hitting the Earth and bouncing back and forth between the ionosphere. That's creating as well an electric field and a natural resonant frequency. And that first harmonic of that frequency is at 7.8 hertz. Our alpha brain waves are around 8 hertz. This is not by mistake. Our biology is electromagnetic, and it's designed to be in tune with the Earth that we live on. And there's many examples of this. And, brain waves, we measure the activity of the heart, the nervous system, the brain. This is all through, electrical activity. We talk, you've talked at length about grounding. We're able to absorb free electrons. Our body has a natural DC potential. We have as many things in our body that operate at specific frequencies, and not to go down any further of the rabbit hole. And then you can get into light. So light, this is all electromagnetic radiation, which just means that, it's made up of electromagnetic waves, which are made up of photons. And everyone thinks of radiation as, ionizing radiation like X-rays and things like that. But light is also radiation. And that's just the visible light spectrum. We have UV, we have infrared, and that's just a tiny sliver. But then everything below that in terms of frequency, we get into the frequencies that we're using as radio communication. Wi-Fi is like 2.4 gigahertz, or cell phones. 5G is in that same range and pushing those frequencies higher. Our power grid is at 60 hertz, alternating current. AC power just means that it's alternating at 60 hertz frequency.
Sorry to interrupt. Current. Does 5G refer to, like, is that the...
No, that's a common... 5G refers to 5th generation. So that's a great question, because this is a common misconception. So, but it will be operating close to that frequency. So that's why it's a misnomer, but it's
so what you're
the frequency range higher. It's anything that would have not existed on this planet, beforehand. And I just gave, it's basically what we're designed to is light from the sun, full spectrum sunlight. There's the Schumann resonance, there's the magnetic field of the Earth, there's very faint radio frequencies that occasionally we get from like distant galaxies, but that's not even worth mentioning. So
yeah. And then anything other than that, so like this computer I'm staring at, this phone that I'm staring at, this microphone, this recorder, these like AirPods, the refrigerator, the microwave, the Wi-Fi in the house, the Bluetooth, the 5G, the TV, the light, every switch, all these things have an electromagnetic field as well.
Everything.
And so what your point is that the inundation, the overwhelming amount that we are exposed to is toxic.
Yes, our biology is not designed to be in tune with these frequencies. So chronic exposure, high power intensity, so just the intensity of the fields are what has been shown to be detrimental. And, there's thousands of studies. You actually have seen Robert F. Kennedy Jr. been on Joe Rogan, and he's mentioned, there is actually thousands of studies that show detrimental health effects of non-native electromagnetic fields. And they're at varying frequencies. There's some at low frequencies like electrical power, and then there's some at the high radio frequencies like where Wi-Fi and cell phones are. But these studies have been suppressed. They've been
because it's inconvenient, like you mentioned.
Think of the tech industry. Think of everything that our economy is kind of rides on, right? And that's why, the pharmaceutical industry suppresses all these, studies as well. It's no different in terms of misinformation than any other centralized industry because it's such a big economic impact. But it's unfortunate because obviously I'm not saying let's go back to the Stone Age, but there are certain things that we could do or just educate people on to have better research, better engineering practices to mitigate the health effects tremendously. But if we don't study them, how could we know what works and what doesn't, or what has a larger impact than something else? But what's conclusive completely is that non-native electromagnetic fields do have an impact on our biology, and we're basically sitting in a giant experiment once again, which seems to be a trend. And this is nothing new. This has been a hotly debated topic since the 70s. It's a big part of the Cold War. Some other countries, such as Russia, Eastern European countries, have 10 to 1,000 times more stringent standards for EMFs. And we're just sitting here as giant guinea pigs in this game. And that's why I refuse to live in a city. And that's why I'm really trying to educate people on this, because you could do a lot of things, and this could be the thing that pushes you over the edge to a serious health issue.
Yeah, and that's why you're out in the freaking middle of nowhere, Wyoming. But the like, because I'm aware of what you're saying. Like, and I would think that like most people listening to this will probably have some idea or will have heard of EMFs and like have that level 1 that you refer to, the level 1 knowledge that they're it's not good for me to be exposed to all these. But what are your like 3 or 4, like a handful of best practices for somebody like myself? Like I'm in Austin right now. I'm not in Wyoming. What would be your best practices for me to mitigate that exposure to the toxin that is EMF, non-native EMF?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, and that's what it comes down to. And I think you can make a substantial difference by just doing small things. So number 1, turn your Wi-Fi off at night. You don't need it on. There's no point of having it on at nighttime when you're not using it. You could literally just plug it out of the outlet. If you want to get real crazy, like I said, people who are really concerned or have electrohypersensitivity, EHS, they might have to use hardwired internet. You don't have to do that if you don't, notice any significant, you have some crazy health concern like MS or ALS. But just turn it off, because a lot of studies actually don't show significant health effects until after 48 hours of chronic exposure. So if you limit that to kind of, half the day, the real issue is when you disturb your sleep. And sleep is the most important aspect of health, in my opinion, circadian health. And that's why it all ties into this, because that's where you get your restoration. That's where you get the cleanup, the cell repair, the autophagy, the apoptosis, which is, programmed cell cleanup, programmed cell death, that is regulated by melatonin. And if you're disrupting melatonin with artificial blue light, which is also a non-native EMF, or your Wi-Fi router, you're creating this inherent stressor on your body. So you're not going to get the restoration that you need. So if you want to prioritize one thing, prioritize creating a sleep sanctuary so you can restore your body from all the shit that you're exposed to throughout the day. And especially if you live in a city or a more polluted area, or you just know you're going to be exposed to things, that's really important. So turn your Wi-Fi router off at night, turn your phone off. Like, don't sleep with your phone on next to your bedside table. Like, it's literally insane to think that you need to be accessible in the middle of the night. Like, just turn it on airplane mode or turn it completely off and put it in a different room or put it across the room, especially away from your head. And when you actually need to use your phone, just, don't hold it right next to your head. The distance is your best friend when it comes to EMFs. Why? Because of what's called inverse square law. So for every 1 unit of measurement that you're further away, you're getting a square in the reduction of the electromagnetic field. So if you're 2 inches away, you will get 1/4 in terms of the electromagnetic field, or whatever the unit is. So if you're 3x the distance away, you'll get a 9x reduction in the field. So distance is your best friend. And you can use technology, hold your phone on speaker, use headphones. It's really simple. I just wouldn't want to have
use wired headphones.
Yeah. And again, and that's the same thing. Like Bluetooth, people are like, oh, it's so low power, it's so low energy. Yeah, it is. But it's literally right next to your brain. You're actually communicating between your head because they're communicating via 2.4 gigahertz through your head. So, and if you wear them for 8 hours a day, like I swear all these finance bros I just think they sleep in them, to be honest, because, that's the look. But it's just unnecessary. And yeah, if you need to use your AirPods or whatever for like 30 minutes, sure. I mean, again, decide what the risk is and what you're willing to trade for convenience, but just don't hold your phone next to your head. And that goes with everything. For distance is your best friend. If there's a high powered, piece of electrical equipment, like, for example, don't stand next to your washing machine for a long time when it's on. I mean, it's just like an example of something.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But yeah, for me, it's turning your appliances, your technology off at nighttime to create that sleep sanctuary. Be strategic. Don't have your cell phone up to your head when you're using it. Unplug appliances that aren't in use, because actually, when it's from an electric field perspective, if you just have your TV, and I just made a video on this yesterday, so electric fields from ungrounded appliances, which, if you have a 2-prong plug from, for your laptop, for your blender, for your TV, for a lamp, that's producing an electric field that's radiating outwards in your room. And if you're in that room, that'll be induced onto your body. So there's 2 ways, or there's an easy way to get rid of that, and you can go ground, because that's going to dissipate that charge, that field, or you can unplug the appliance when you're not using it. There's just no need to have everything plugged in all the time if you're not using it. So if you have a printer,
I'm looking
next
at this
to your
TV,
desk,
about to go plug it right now.
Like, seriously, I mean, you just don't need to have it plugged in. And it's like, is that TV going to kill you? No, but if you have 10 appliances and you're sitting in a room for 8 to 12 hours a day for 10 years, that could potentially cause you to have detrimental health. It could disrupt your mitochondrial function. Again, we don't know the dosage. We don't know the specifics because of the lack of quality research, but we know that they do have detrimental health effects, and there are easy ways to just reduce your exposure.
Here's a helpful anecdote, and I want to get to your 4th and 5th, or like however many practices you have. It's kind of the inverse. So like, people are aware of this. This is why people are drawn towards nature. when you go into nature, you're like your hunt, you're not exposed to any of those EMFs. And that is a reason that you feel better. So if people don't necessarily understand the science or the studies that show that over inundation, like from this lamp and this amp and this TV and all this stuff in your house, if they don't understand the science of how that's negative, well, then take it on the other side and say, okay, well, when I'm away from all these things, how much more calm do I feel? How much more at peace do I feel? That's an interesting way to look at it.
Unfortunately, you won't really realize until you start cutting things out. But then when you add them back, like if I go into an airport, a mall, a really high EMF area, I notice like tremendously. If I hold my phone up to my head, and I think this is also, I'm a little more sensitive since my brain injuries. Like I'll get a headache in 10 seconds. Like I'm not even kidding. And it's just a very dull one, but I can just feel it. Same with artificial blue light. If I go into an artificially lit room, fluorescent lights, oh man, I just feel drained at the end of the, like at an hour, I just feel so drained. And that's because I don't use any artificial lighting really at all in my house. Or in the summer, I mean, I don't even turn on lights. Like I just use natural lights all the time, and I'm always outside. And yeah, I mean, if you want to summarize it, elimination is your best friend because that just completely eliminates the source. So if you're not using something, just unplug it. Especially if it's a two-pronged plug, doesn't have a grounding cable. Obviously, you need to have your refrigerator, things plugged in all the time. I'm not telling you to unplug that. And then,
all that elk meat would go bad.
Yeah. So, and then distance is also, that's.
What about your bed? Like I've done that before where I take my bed away. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, again, if you have electrical outlets like right up against your bed frame where your head is, I would just move your bed like 6 to 12 inches off the wall, and that can make a profound difference. And if you read like the electric field reading right at the outlet, it could be hundreds of volts per meter. And then if you go like 6 inches away, it could be a 10 to 20 fold reduction if you go a foot away. So that's easy. Like you just don't need to be near your bed.
So one of the reasons that is the outlets, and then also just like you think about these walls now in houses, they're hollow and these wires are all running through them and things like that. So that makes sense. Yeah.
So the outlets, that's all the electrical power. It's at 60 hertz, and it's going to be emitting an electric field, which is voltage. No matter if it's powered on, if there's anything plugged into it. But if you have something plugged into it and current is flowing, then you get the magnetic field component of that as well. So that's, then you're having more of an effect. But if there's nothing plugged in, you still have that electric field. Yeah, you can just move your bed. Especially, I would just want things away. The most sensitive organs and areas of your body to EMFs are the ones that are, the most electrical in nature. So that's your brain, your heart, and then actually, like your testicles, ovaries, these are very sensitive areas to EMFs because they're very electrical in how they communicate, and they have very high density of mitochondria. And mitochondria, which to me is the most important aspect of our biology, the powerhouse of the cell, is very electromagnetic in nature, and I just wouldn't want to really be disrupting that constantly. So elimination, distance, and then duration. Again, chronic exposure is everything. So if you can really create a sleep sanctuary and get that restoration, you're going to be doing just fine, and you're going to be able to tolerate it throughout the day. I'm not asking you to be neurotic about it, but if you're just aware and you make these small little changes, I guarantee you'll feel a lot better, and you'll be more resilient. And
what was the third one? The D?
Duration. Yeah. So like I said, just turn your appliances off at night. Your Wi-Fi router, your cell phone. You don't need it on at night. Think of 50 years. Think of 20 years ago. People were not accessible. We're so accessible. We feel like we need to be on our phones as much as possible. And I'm guilty of this too, but my phone's on airplane mode literally all the time. Only when I'm, out somewhere, I'll flick it on for for a bit. And if I do have it on, I don't need it on my body. Don't carry your phone when it's on on your body. There's the warning label somewhere that is in really small print that shows you should never have your phone physically on your body. Apple will even tell you that because of the electromagnetic radiation. And what's really scary is all the standards for this stuff. You know, they're all done on like a 6'3", 220-pound male. And it's really sad. And what I would say, Nolan, is most important. If you have a family, if you're listening to this and you have children, they are 10 to 100 times more susceptible to EMFs than adults. Why? They have smaller bodies and they have a higher percentage of water content, which water is probably the mechanism of disruption to our biology because water is very sensitive to EMFs. It operates through electromagnetic communication. And yeah, they're tiny. So a phone held up to a 10-year-old's brain, a 5-year-old's brain, is going to penetrate way deeper and cause way more havoc. And there's studies that show absorption in, you know, children's brain could be up to 10 times higher. So,
and I'm sure
really,
that's another.
It's scary. And then you see what has happened in the last 10 years, man. iPhone, iPad, 10 years old, 5 years old, 3 years old. Oh, the kid's screaming. Give him an iPad. It's unacceptable. You can't do the blue light is one thing, but the EMFs to a developing child is really scary for me because the next generation is what really matters. And if we're setting them up for failure now and they're having all these mitochondrial mutations at an early age, they're going to be getting chronic disease in their 20s, in their 30s. And we're just going to be further worsening this issue. And that goes along with the whole realm of other toxins that we know exist. So if you're a parent, I would say it matters.
Man, I love your passion about it too. And I also like that you referred to it as a toxin and you even said pollution earlier because a lot of people don't do that. What are your thoughts on Faraday, like Faraday cloth or curtain or whatever that is?
Yeah, so shielding is kind of, you know, the last, I guess, mitigation tactic that you have. And it's last for a reason because it should, you know, the other ones I mentioned, elimination, distance, duration, are more important. They're more effective. But you can buy products. So a Faraday cage is a conductive covering of a surface. So you use a conductive metal, silver, copper, and when you have a conductive material covering something, it will shield the inside from external EMFs. But it can also be detrimental. For example, if you're flying in an airplane, that's also, or you're in a car, you will also be keeping all those EMFs inside. So a Faraday cage, when you're on the inside and there's EMFs bouncing around, is also not good. But yeah, you can buy shielding. You could buy silver curtains. You could buy, you know, silver socks and gloves. And there's companies that make these devices. And I'm actually actively working with some of these folks and some of these experts in this space. And yeah, I think they're fantastic, especially for like travel scenarios. If you are electro-hypersensitive, you might have to wear some of these things just to be able to use technology. You think that's hard to believe? That there's a lot of people actually like that. And it's a tool, again. But you need to be careful. You should not just go and paint your whole bedroom with silver paint. That's insane because where is the source coming from? The angle of incidence is extremely important. And then you're going to be blocking yourself from all the native electromagnetic fields as well. So that's why it can get complicated. And that's why I'm, delving into becoming a consultant in this space to help people kind of EMF proof their house. As you understand what's really important. Like if you're building a house, you might not want, the grid connect to come in where your bedroom is, or you want the breaker box to be in a specific place. Or you can install breaker switches to be able to easily turn off the breaker that's feeding the circuit in your bedroom every night. So it's just your bedroom. You can't do that. Don't just be going down flipping breakers like every night. They're not designed to be flipped on and off 365 days a year. So that's where it kind of, the consulting space comes into it. And then, what are you living close to? I would say if anyone is listening to this and they're moving or they're constantly on, the road, try to avoid high non-native EMF areas. So like substations, high voltage transmission lines, hospitals, any power generation plants, airports, data centers, any factories. If you can, try not to live next to these places, like right next to these places. That could really be a difference, because the intensity of EMFs coming from there is extremely high. And if you're just, a quarter mile further away, over 10 years could be the difference between you getting cancer when you're 60 or not.
Yeah, elimination, distance, duration. That's 3 helpful points. I'd never heard anybody speak about that. And it just helps me to, like, that's practical. Okay, the first line of defense is elimination. Just get it out. Don't be around it. Don't let it happen. Okay, well, then I can at least distance it. Okay, well, if I have to be close to it, make it a short duration. That's really helpful. I kind of want to switch gears here. And I don't know if you have a time constraint.
I'm good. I'm good.
Okay, cool. You have a thread that kind of went mega viral, you could say, on one Bill Gates.
Yeah.
But I want to try to find it real quick, read it. It says, Bill Gates has spent $6 billion on influencing agriculture globally with a key focus on influence in Africa. Here's the real reason why. What is the reason?
Oh, it's just control, man. I mean, they want control. They want influence. They want dependency from these people. They don't want people to be only independent or dependent in their community. So they've invested billions.
They being Bill Gates and as the spearhead of the NWO, the New World Order.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, whoever, Bill and Melinda Gates. I mean, there's a lot of other folks out there, but they've invested under the mirage that they're trying to improve yields of farming and save, the hungry people. But in reality, what they've done is they've transformed the farming model from, something that's more regenerative, more holistic management to industrial farming. So what's the difference between those two systems? High input, high output. That's industrial farming. And that's only high output for a certain period of time, because eventually you will degrade the soil to such an extent that it will not be high output anymore, and those yields will continue to fall. And we're just starting to see that now, as being a part of this for the last 50, 60, 70 years. And that's what they've done in Africa. And what else have they done? They've completely captured the seeds for crops, this diversity. They are basically nuking biodiversity, right? So we used to have hundreds of species of corn, fruits. Every single fruit you see used to have tens to hundreds of different species, like different variations. And now there's just 2. And they've been genetically altered. They've been bred for, yield. They've been bred for color. They've been bred for symmetry. So it's aesthetic. So it's marketable. So it's resistant to pesticides and herbicides. So it has a longer shelf life. So it can be picked pre-ripe and then shipped halfway across the world. It has to fit this model, or else it won't fit the centralized industrial farming system. So that's exactly what Bill Gates has done. And he's created these seed vaults and everything. Mm-hmm. And yeah, that's basically making, when you take the biodiverse seed culture and this trading with, different tribes in Africa was a big deal with seeds and different crops. That was how they kind of intermingled with the different tribes and how biodiversity spread in this decentralized food web. And then Bill Gates has come in and told them, no, you need to use my seeds and my GMO and these fertilizers and this equipment. And he's giving them all this money to do this. And they're kind of back up against the wall. And sometimes they don't have a choice. And people have spoken out very passionately against this. But then it's just creating this reliance. Oh, we don't have those historic seed cultures anymore. We have to go to Bill Gates to get seeds. And then he just has all this control, and it's creating dependency on the system. They don't want sovereign communities. They want dependent communities. That way they can control you and limit your inputs, your access to whatever. And that's what this whole game is about. That's the IMF, the World Bank. They want these third world. They've been preying on third world countries for decades so that they can be dependent on the World Bank, on the system, and then you see an El Salvador giving them the middle finger and saying, fuck you, we're going to adopt Bitcoin standard, we're going to build decentralized solutions, we're going to be kind of the blueprint for how folks could do it if they want to be outside the system. And then you get the mainstream media writing articles about President Bukele in El Salvador saying he's a dictator when he just lowered their homicide rate from like the highest in the world to not being even significant in pretty much an overnight fashion, which is what happens when you actually take control and want to build solutions and care about the citizens in your country. And there's not many representative politicians or world leaders who actually care about the individuals in their society.
Yeah, and this like I said, I think about things through a tribal lens. I am of the firm belief, perhaps one of the most firm beliefs that I hold, that we have outpaced our physiological evolution with our societal evolution. So our hardwiring is no longer compatible with the societal standard for most of the world. We are tribal beings, tribes being 50 to 150 people maximum. That means for the vast majority of our human existence, we have interacted with 150 people or less for the vast majority of our life. Here we are in 2023 where people are trying to push globalism as this is the way forward for humanity, when in reality, like, they're trying to create this one world, like this new world order, this one massive tribe. But as I mentioned, I believe that it's not compatible with who we are. It doesn't align with our physiology. So then I think that's why there's so much sickness, so much disease, so much depression, so much anxiety, because these lifestyles that these people are pushing. Like Bill Gates I think he's the largest single agricultural landowner in America, if I'm not mistaken.
No, not really. That number gets conflated quite a bit, but he has like 300,000 acres and he has a lot. But yeah, he has a lot of land.
Yeah, well, like just the same idea. Like most of the land, or not most of it, but a vast majority of it is held by these, maybe not just him, but by corporations and centralized food.
BlackRock owns like so much real estate. It's insane.
Yeah, and exactly. And you think about the ties that's a podcast in and of itself. Just the BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard, dude. Yeah, that's wild. But my point is this: you're talking about sovereignty. Tribes were sovereign. They would rely on themselves and themselves only with the land that they lived on. So they understood that, okay, this is on us to cultivate a lifestyle and to live a lifestyle that is in tune with the land that we live with and on, so that we do not degrade the land that we live with and on over time, so that the land ends up not being able to provide for us. Now we have this massive model where it's like we have to be global, we have to mass immigration, like massive farms, single crop agriculture, all this bullshit. When in reality, in my opinion, what you're saying is exactly right. It's the tribe, like it's sovereignty over my life and those around me, not like, I don't know, not being a part of the machine, I guess.
Yeah, and we don't have a food production issue, really. We don't have actually, we don't even think we have an overpopulation issue, especially with what's going on now. I mean, nobody even has like families anymore like that. In a few generations, I think we'll have a nice natural balancing mechanism with all the woke people refusing to have kids or changing their biology to not be able to have kids. But again, that's why I have such an issue with indoctrinating that younger generation, because they're going to grow up or exposing them to toxins at an early age, because it's going to really set them up for failure. But yeah, we don't have a food production issue. We have a food access issue, and we have a food distribution system issue because of this global supply chain that we have. And it's just insanity when we're shipping, high quality US beef to Korea, to China in mass quantities, and then importing the rest here, when if that just stayed within our local economy, it would be far more resilient. It would be far more cost effective from just a common sense standpoint. Of course, the companies would probably make less money because China's probably paying them more than a local grocery store would. But it's a waste of energy, and it's not indicative of a resilient system. But that's what decentralization kind of preaches, is getting back to locality And I think that's the most important, that's the most effective takeaway that I can tell anybody: how to become more decentralized, how to improve your health. Be more local. Get in tune with your local environment. Eat locally. Support locally. Support businesses. Buy food. Get connected with local producers. Because if you force yourself to live locally, you'll inherently improve, the economy that's going on, the circular economy. Would you be willing to pay 20% more to keep a nice small farmer who's working their ass off in your local county, as opposed to giving it to JBS, Cargill, Tyson, or whoever, Nestle? You should. I would hope so. Because if those guys go out of business, they're not going to exist. There's not going to be a next generation. And then when you're living locally, you're more connected. You're more seasonally consistent, which is, our biology is designed to be very cyclical, very seasonal. So I always talk about this, and everyone's like, yeah, you're crazy. But, you shouldn't be eating bananas in New York City in December. It makes no sense. And you're supporting a centralized food chain that is corrupt. And really, you could be supporting someone who's local instead. And then you're doing a better service to your biology and your health as well. So embrace locality and embrace seasonality, I think, are really big ways and easy ways that you can improve sovereignty and your health.
Yeah, those are massive levers. And it brings to mind just maybe a simple question, but maybe a complex answer. What do you believe is the biggest lever that somebody can pull right now? Let me clarify, because the biggest lever for you may be different from. So say somebody's living in New York. It's that person in New York who lives kind of just like a normal lifestyle, works in a blue light EMF infested area. They work a job, blah, blah, blah. They go to the gym maybe. What's the biggest lever that you think they could pull?
If you're not considering moving an option, which I will assume not.
That could be an option, because
I would say you don't have to move. For starters, start thinking about how you can mitigate the toxins in your environment. If you can't avoid the EMFs, you can't avoid the artificial light. Everything that we just talked about, the light piece, I'm sure Zaid touched upon that. Buy blue light blocking glasses. Live in that consistent routine with nature. Watch the sunrise. You can watch the sunrise. You could be outside in New York City at sunrise. You can watch the sunset. You could go drive somewhere. Go to the farmer's market. The benefit of being in a big city is all the food producers are going to come to you. You could probably drive 30 minutes outside where you live, or take a train or ride a bike, and you could find local food producers. Support them instead of supporting Whole Foods, who's importing all that fruit from California, which is 3,000 miles away. Eat locally. You can do that in any place in the country. Be conscious of the toxins, and just focus on living a life that is fulfilling and meaningful to you. If you think that going out on the weekends and going to the club and staying out till 4 a.m. is fulfilling, I'm probably not the person to convince you. But the weekends, you have if you're working a 9 to 5, you really need to be taking advantage of your weekends, because you have this opportunity to fully immerse yourself. If you're living in New York City, go to the beach. Go to the Adirondacks. Go to other state parks in New York. There's a ton within 3 hours. Go to Vermont. Go to New Hampshire. Go to Massachusetts. There's a ton of nature. Spend your whole weekend out in nature. That will help reset you to be able to handle the toxins of living in a highly polluted city, a highly stressful environment like New York. And if you're not going to do that, if you're going to instead pour more gasoline on the fire and get shit-faced, then don't be surprised when you have terrible fatigue. You're reliant on a whole slew of stimulants and painkillers in your 20s, in your 30s, because your body can't handle that. You're overwhelming it, and it's not designed to operate in this sort of environment.
Yeah, and that was pretty diplomatic, because my number one lever would definitely be move. But I mean, I guess that kind of
it's actually really not an option immediately for a lot of people. So I try and understand that, right? It is challenging.
Yeah, that would be a massive lever. But the reason I say that is on a grand scale, and Noah Ryan talks about this a lot, like for hunter type specifically, being very sensitive to environment as a whole. So for me, that's always been whenever I find myself getting into a rut, like a change in my environment, and like you mentioned, it doesn't have to be like a complete move, but like changing something in my environment, like you just mentioned, start unplugging your things, start going to the local store, just something changing in my environment has always been a good catalyst for positive change in my life. So it doesn't have to be move. You're correct, but that's great advice.
Yeah, I mean, it's insanity to keep doing the same thing and expecting different results, right? Yeah. So if you feel like shit, you're never going to heal in that same environment that you got sick in. You need to change something. It doesn't need to be your physical location. It could be, but it needs to be your routine, your mindset, and how you spend your time.
And you mentioned that, and my mind goes immediately to hospitals, which are blue light, EMF infested areas with cleaning products that are fucking poisonous and no natural light and dog shit food, and we're expected to go heal there. That's kind of ironic.
It's actually insane. And then schools, how about schools? They're even worse. These are prisons, right? They're designed a specific way for a certain reason. I'll say that. So if you think this stuff doesn't matter, then I don't know what to tell you, because it's really, once you look through this lens, you'll never unsee any of this. And it's really sad. It's actually really sad, but hopefully through education we can empower consumers and people of the society to take a stand and not tolerate this and create solutions that are better.
Yeah, the example I always give of schools is my own personal anecdote. I took ADHD medicine for 7 years because my freshman year of high school, I started to have bad grades, started having like focus issues in school and all this shit. And they pumped me with fucking meth for 7 years every day. And I mentioned this so many times, but it literally makes me sick sometimes thinking about it. I was a 13-year-old boy who absolutely loved sports, who absolutely loved being outside, who liked moving around, who was very social, and I loved talking to people and communicating. And I didn't give a fuck about biology that my fat teacher taught me in a fucking basement classroom with no natural light. Oh. Actually only artificial light, and I had trouble focusing, and they're like, oh, here's meth, take 40 milligrams of Vyvanse every day, you'll be all right. And it makes me it really does disgust me thinking about, because there's millions of young boys the exact same way, women as well, but men are vastly more affected by ADHD medicine and all that stuff. So it just makes me sick, dude.
Yeah, it's infuriating to think about. And now there's even more technology and more things keeping children inside when, there's fear mongering over the sun and all this nonsense. For me, it was the same. Luckily, my mom would have never tolerated medication, thankfully. But I had, if I didn't play sports like for 4 hours a day, then I wouldn't have been able to do it. Like I wouldn't have been able to sit in a classroom. I barely was able to, but because I was able to play sports, and I notice that now, like especially in the summer, when there's strong UV, we are meant to physically be outside as men and exerting ourselves. That is what we are meant to do. And yeah, if there's less light, it's colder, we can be a little more creative. That's like a natural balance and cyclicality there, but that's not ADHD. That's biology, just what we are designed to do. And if you really, as a child, to me, it's almost criminal, borderline child abuse, the way we're treating our children nowadays. And I hope this trend in the health space and the personal individual responsibility, the more decentralized mindset, getting back to more ancestral roots, really takes momentum here, because I really feel bad for this next generation of children, but I'm optimistic with so many more like-minded individuals like yourself and the community that we have, that we will be able to raise the next generation the correct way. And that's all you can do is take the lessons you've learned, the hardships that we've experienced, and create a knowledge base and create an environment so that the next generation doesn't have to experience that, and we can set them up for success instead of failure from the bat.
I think that's a phenomenal way to wrap this up, man. I literally fully agree with everything that you just said, and I don't even want to try to impart any lower wisdom in it. That was awesome. Tristan, I thank you for your time, man. Is there any last messages you want to send?
No, I guess, if you guys want to learn more, you can follow me on Twitter at Bitcoin and_beef. As mentioned, I have my own podcast with Ryan, my co-host, called Decentralized Radio. So we try and get all these experts on that are, very well versed in this space, that are building actual solutions to allow people to become more decentralized. So that's, homesteading, regenerative agriculture, a lot of folks talking about health in, ways that you probably would never hear about. And we were trying to get more folks talking about hunting on as well. And it's a cool forum. If you want to see what's going on, you can check us out there. Also just launched a website for myself diving into this, health consulting, tristanhealth.com. If you have any questions, you can always reach out to me on Twitter or there. And I hope that this was educational for you all. This is a fun rip, Nolan. And hope to connect in person sometime soon. Maybe we can make that work.
Yeah, dude. I say this to everybody. I think round 2 in person is like my goal for everybody. Like, 'cause this is all nice. This is all good and dandy to talk through a screen, but nothing competes with that. Maybe we'll get in the woods, dude. Ebe round 2 will be in the woods.
That'd be awesome. If you're not busy next week, I could use some help. So if you want to fly out, you're more than welcome.
Oh shit, dude! You might have just put me in a tough spot there. Might have to cancel stuff. But dude, and I'll link all your socials and your website in the show notes. So everybody follow him. He's a phenomenal follow. Tristan, I can't thank you enough for your time, man. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on, Nolan. Appreciate it.
And with that, I hope y'all enjoyed the conversation with Tristan. That was an absolute ripper of a podcast. Covered a ton of things. Tristan's got a fascinating insight into the centralization of food, money, and really every industry. He is, in my opinion, living the right way, doing the right things, and helping people along their path of becoming more sovereign, which is something that I align with and something I'm trying to become. So really valuable conversation for me. I hope it was for y'all as well. Make sure you follow him on all the platforms and go to his website, listen to his podcast. All of those will be linked in the show notes. Like I said, I thoroughly enjoyed this. I hope y'all did as well. Until next time, stand firm in the arena.